QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021 Accounts Payable Graphs. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars practice file. We currently have the Open Windows open. You can open the Open Windows by going to the View drop-down, selecting the Open Windows list. We now want to take a look at the Accounts Payable graph, which was going to be something that will be supporting the major financial statements of the balance sheet and the income statement, more specifically the balance sheet line item of Accounts Payable. Let's open up the balance sheet first by going to the Reports drop-down, Company and Financial, and scrolling on down to that Balance Sheet Standard. Changing the date up top to 02/28/21. Now this is going to be similar to what we did with the receivables, but now we have the mirror image. This is stuff that we owe to somebody else. We owe to vendors. So here's the payable that we have on the books, and now we want to break that out by who we owe it to. Now there's not a lot of activity in our report right now, so the graph's going to be pretty plain. But note that there is an accounts receivable graph, and if you had a lot of vendors that you would owe to, then you would be a similar kind of function as we saw with the receivable. So you can find that graph by going, well, let's first open up the report that the graph is going to be on. The graph is going to be on the supporting report related to the accounts payable, breaking out the payable by who we owe to, by vendor. So let's open up that report. Reports drop down. We're going to go into the payables, vendors and payables. So vendors and payables, and we want to take a look at the vendor balance summary. Vendor balance summary, and this is from the period 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. So as you can see, we only owe one vendor right now, so it's going to be a very plain graph, but you'll see it in concept. Let's open up the graph now. Reports drop down. We're going to go on down to the vendors and payables. You can open it up from here, accounts payable graph, or you can go to the Reports drop-down, Reports Center, and you can then, I'm going to maximize the screen here. We're going to go to the Vendors and Payables, scroll on down to our graph. So there is our graph. We're then going to run that report, running that report, and then changing the date up top to 02/28/21. And okay. So there's our graph, very plain. And here's our key to the right because we only have one vendor. So the whole graph is one vendor at this point. But just note you have a default graph here in a similar way as you have a default graph to the accounts receivable, which you could then add to your presentations by copying and pasting it, for example, to a PowerPoint or to your Excel worksheet. We did that with the receivable, so I won't repeat the process here because it's going to be much the same. It's the mirror image of the receivable, what we did with the receivable. So if you want to look on what you can do with this graph, you can take a look at that. And if you want to, you take a look at the accounts receivable, what we did with the accounts receivable graph, which will be reflecting or something similar we can do here. And I also would recommend exporting the data to Excel and practicing that, because that way you have a lot more flexibility with what you can do with the graph and how you can display the graph. We did that on the accounts receivable side as well. So if you want to practice exporting data, which I highly recommend doing, then do that there. And if you can export data from any database program, whether it be QuickBooks or something else, whether you're in accounting or something else, there's always some type of numbers, always some type of data that you can put into some kind of graph. And if you can just export it to a spreadsheet program, making graphs is really easy. So I highly recommend doing that. Now this top portion is going to represent how past due items are. If you wanted to see where that data is coming from, what's the related report, it would be the Reports drop-down. It would be the Vendors and Payables, and that's coming from the AP Aging Summary. The AP Aging Summary as of 02/28/21. And there it is. It's all current at this point in time. So we'll stop it here, but just note, again, if you want more detail on what to do with this graph, look at the accounts receivable side, and this will be basically the mirror image of it on the accounts payable side.